Headline-grabbing 1995 murder trial. O.J. Simpson, he's no stranger to crowds, cheers, and jeers.
The name O.J. Simpson instantly stirs a wave of emotions for millions of Americans, largely due to his alleged role in the murder of his wife. Though he once basked in fame and success as a celebrated NFL star, those achievements are overshadowed by the dark and controversial chapters of his personal life, fraught with legal battles and relentless public attention. Sadly, the consequences of his actions have deeply affected his children, especially his daughter Sydney. While she has rarely spoken publicly about her father, her actions seem to reveal far more than words ever could. So get ready as we uncover the unsettling truths about O.J. Simpson's life, seen through the eyes of the children who lived in its shadow. To understand the revelations, we must first delve into the context. Before the scandal, O.J.'s first marriage. Long before the scandals and media frenzy that would later define his public image, O.J. Simpson shared a seemingly wholesome beginning with his childhood sweetheart, Marguerite Whitley. The two had known each other since their high school days, building a bond that predated O.J.'s meteoric rise in the world of sports. Their relationship began when Simpson was just a promising athlete at the University of Southern California, and Marguerite was a grounding force in his life as he pursued his career in football and acting. The young couple married in 1967, both only 19 years old at the time. A year later, Simpson's career skyrocketed when he received the prestigious Heisman Trophy in 1968. By then, their family had begun to grow. They welcomed their first child, Arnell, in 1968, followed by Jason in 1970 and Aaron in 1977. On the surface, it looked like they had built the perfect life: a successful athlete, a beautiful family, and rising fame. However, the cracks beneath the surface soon began to show. As Simpson's fame and professional obligations grew, so did the strain on their relationship. He was often away from home, staying at a luxurious residence in a Buffalo suburb, while Marguerite remained with the children at their Brentwood mansion. The physical and emotional distance between them only deepened, leading to growing tension and eventual separation. While some close to the couple pointed to Simpson's hectic schedule as the main source of conflict, others believed that fame itself played a central role in their downfall. As his star rose, it became increasingly difficult for Marguerite to maintain a quiet, private life. O.J. later admitted that even simple walks turned into public spectacles, with cameras flashing and fans swarming. Despite the growing problems, Marguerite chose to remain largely out of the spotlight, possibly a reflection of her introverted personality. But the private nature of their struggles eventually gave way to public discord. Their marriage officially ended in March 1979. By June 1980, the situation had soured even further, with reports suggesting that Marguerite threatened to call the police and physically confront O.J. over his refusal to leave their shared Brentwood home. What began as a youthful love story had unraveled under the weight of fame, distance, and personal transformation. From this point of view, it was quite clear that the strains of O.J.'s fame played a role in the divorce proceedings. But the story of the demise of his first marriage would be incomplete without mentioning the star's 2-year affair with Nicole Brown, who would later become his wife. O.J.'s second marriage. O.J. Simpson first crossed paths with Nicole Brown 2 years before his previous marriage officially ended. According to the Los Angeles Times, Nicole, then just 18 years old, was working at the Daisy, a trendy and upscale nightclub in Beverly Hills where Simpson was a regular. Despite the significant age gap between them, their connection was instant and intense. Nicole's cousin later described how their romance took off like a wildfire, fast, passionate, and all-consuming. Nicole appeared unfazed by their age difference or Simpson's high-profile lifestyle. But within just a few months of dating, troubling behavior began to surface. One of the earliest red flags was O.J.'s request that Nicole drop out of school and move in with him. It signaled a controlling dynamic that would come to define much of their relationship. Nonetheless, Their bond continued to grow, and in 1985 they got married. Over the course of their 7-year marriage, they had 2 children together, Sydney Brooke and Justin Ryan. Early on, Simpson publicly showered Nicole with compliments, often referring to her as his rock and praising her for the support she provided during critical points in his career. To the outside world, they looked like a glamorous and successful couple. However, the reality behind closed doors painted a much darker picture. OJ's possessiveness intensified with time, and according to close family members and friends, Nicole became increasingly isolated. Many claimed she was cut off from the outside world, barely allowed to socialize or maintain independent relationships. These troubling patterns of control eventually escalated into physical abuse. Nicole made numerous calls to the police over the years, reporting that Simpson had assaulted her. In one documented incident, Simpson was reportedly heard yelling, "I don't want that woman sleeping in my bed anymore." Despite multiple allegations and reports, Simpson was only arrested once in connection with spousal abuse. That charge, however, did not stick, as he managed to defend himself successfully in court. The abuse, unfortunately, did not end with that arrest. Nicole continued to endure mistreatment, even as she remained married to Simpson. Her family, especially her father, Louis Brown, reportedly encouraged her to reconcile with OJ rather than pursue separation or divorce. This advice, many believe, was influenced by financial entanglements. Simpson had helped Louis secure a lucrative investment deal, which allegedly benefited the Brown family financially. That support may have clouded their judgment when it came to protecting Nicole. Nicole later confided that the abuse often stemmed from confrontations about OJ's infidelities. She claimed that when she challenged him about his extramarital affairs, his temper would flare. One of the more brazen admissions came when Simpson allegedly told her about his year-long affair with actress Tawny Kitaen, while Nicole was pregnant with their child. This wasn't the only rumored affair. Speculation also surrounded a supposed intimate encounter between Simpson and Kris Jenner, a claim brought to light in the documentary Who Killed Nicole. According to Simpson, something happened between them in a jacuzzi, though Jenner publicly denied any affair in a 2013 interview. Nicole's sister, Denise Brown, provided one of the most harrowing accounts of the couple's violent relationship. She recalled witnessing a particularly violent outburst where OJ stormed upstairs to change, then returned downstairs to grab Nicole, slammed her against the wall, and threw her out of the house. Denise herself was then forcefully removed from the home, landing painfully on her elbows outside. The traumatic memory remained etched in her mind as a chilling example of OJ's rage. On another occasion, after enduring a violent beating, Nicole called 911 and was taken to the hospital. She reportedly told authorities that OJ had beaten her so badly she required medical attention. Nicole also described the terrifying transformation in his demeanor during these episodes. She said his eyes became cold, wild, and almost animal-like, with veins bulging from his neck in fury. Despite the injuries, both Nicole and OJ lied to the hospital staff, claiming she had fallen off a bike, an attempt to shield the truth and perhaps protect what was left of their public image. Eventually, Nicole reached her breaking point. Emotionally drained and physically worn down, she made the difficult decision to leave the marriage. But before filing for divorce, she poured her heart out in a letter to OJ, a vulnerable and honest account of her pain. In the letter, she expressed how she had repeatedly taken the blame for his infidelities and forgiven him far more than he ever deserved. The marriage finally ended on October 15, 1992. Many believed that would be the final chapter in their turbulent relationship. But tragically, it wasn't the end. What followed would shock the nation and the world, a grim continuation that would turn this already troubled love story into one of the most infamous cases in American history. The death of Nicole Brown. Following her divorce from O.J. Simpson, Nicole Brown embraced her newfound independence and focused on being a devoted single mother. She and her children moved into a rented home, and with the financial support secured from the divorce settlement, $403,750 in addition to $10,000 per month in child support, Nicole was able to support her family and begin a new chapter. Despite the separation, O.J. and Nicole attempted to rekindle their relationship sometime between 1992 and late 1993. However, it quickly became clear that this decision was a mistake. Nicole's phone records later revealed O.J.'s increasingly aggressive behavior, and he appeared to be even more enraged by the fact that Nicole was dating again. The controlling tendencies he had displayed during their marriage had escalated into dangerous obsession. According to Kris Jenner, Nicole grew fearful for her safety. She confided in close friends that she believed O.J. was fully capable of killing her, and even more disturbingly, of getting away with it. Sadly, her fears would prove prophetic. In the months leading up to her death, Nicole continued to distance herself emotionally and physically from O.J. In 1993, the Simpson family attended the premiere of Naked Gun 33 1/3 and later visited the Jenner household with their children. Yet behind the scenes, Nicole was already preparing for a final break. By May 1994, she had begun looking for a new home. Her real estate agent, Gene McKenna, recalled Nicole expressing hope and excitement about her future, saying things like, "I can really do this," as she envisioned a life free from fear. On the night of June 12, 1994, events took a tragic turn. Around 8 p.m., O.J. reportedly called Nicole, followed by another call from her mother at 9:40 p.m., who had left her glasses at the restaurant where they had dined. Ron Goldman, a friend of Nicole's who worked at the restaurant, volunteered to return them. Later that evening, neighbors heard a dog barking and noticed blood on its paws. The dog's frantic behavior led them to investigate, eventually discovering a horrifying scene. Nicole and Ron had both been brutally murdered while her children were asleep inside the house. Nicole's throat had been slashed so deeply it was nearly severed, and Ron had suffered numerous knife wounds while seemingly trying to defend her. Nicole's daughter, Sydney, left a heartbreaking message on the family answering machine, praying her mother's death was not real. But the nightmare was. On June 16, 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson was laid to rest. The arrest and trial of O.J. Simpson. Following the brutal murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, former football star O.J. Simpson quickly emerged as the primary suspect. His history of domestic violence and hostility toward Nicole had already been well documented, providing law enforcement with strong grounds for suspicion. Rather than turning himself in after the murders, Simpson went into hiding, sparking national concern and media frenzy. He was eventually located in a white Ford Bronco, driven by his longtime friend Al Cowlings, hiding in the back seat with a firearm. Simpson's refusal to surrender led to a now infamous slow-speed car chase on June 17, 1994, which lasted over an hour and unfolded live on national television. Approximately 95 million people tuned in to watch the surreal event, which brought highways in Southern California to a halt and captivated an entire nation. With helicopters flying overhead and police vehicles trailing the Bronco, it became one of the most watched police pursuits in American history. Eventually, Simpson returned to his home in Brentwood, where he was arrested and taken into custody. Simpson entered a plea of not guilty at his arraignment on July 22, 1994. The court proceedings were presided over by Judge Lance Ito, and the trial was scheduled to begin on January 24, 1995. The prosecution presented a compelling narrative built around O.J.'s documented record of spousal abuse before their 1992 divorce. They argued that this violent history pointed to a clear motive: jealousy and rage over Nicole's new life and relationships. To counter the damning evidence, Simpson assembled what came to be known as the Dream Team, a formidable group of high-profile defense attorneys. This legal team included Robert Shapiro, Johnny Cochran, F. Lee Bailey, Alan Dershowitz, Robert Kardashian, Sean Chapman-Hawley, and Robert Blazier. Their strategy focused on discrediting the prosecution's case by suggesting that evidence had been mishandled or deliberately planted by law enforcement. One of the most controversial figures in the prosecution was Detective Mark Fuhrman, who claimed to have found a blood-stained leather glove at Simpson's property. The defense argued that this glove had been planted and couldn't have belonged to O.J., as it did not fit his hand when he tried it on in court. The famous line from Cochran, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit," became a turning point in the trial. Additionally, Foreman's history of making racist remarks was brought to light, severely undermining the credibility of the prosecution and reinforcing the defense's theory of racial bias and police misconduct. The trial quickly became a national spectacle, dominating news coverage for months and dividing the country. Many white Americans viewed Simpson as guilty, while a majority of black Americans saw him as a symbol of resistance against a historically racist justice system. The courtroom proceedings and dramatic testimonies turned the trial into a media sensation, with millions of Americans glued to their screens every day. After months of testimony and legal battles, the jury reached a verdict on October 2, 1995. Judge Ito delayed the public announcement until the next day. When the world heard the shocking conclusion, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. The courtroom erupted with mixed emotions, cheers and tears from Simpson's supporters, and disbelief and sorrow from the victims' families and others who had expected a conviction. While the verdict marked the end of the criminal trial, the story didn't end there. Speculations about Simpson's guilt continued to circulate, especially after Tawny Kitaen, a former actress and one-time lover of O.J., came forward with startling claims. According to Kitaen, she had maintained contact with Simpson even during his marriage to Nicole and allegedly knew sensitive information about the murders. She claimed that O.J. had practically confessed to her, and she intended to reveal this in her memoir. Just weeks before her death in 2021, Kitaen reached out to journalist Heaton, suggesting that powerful individuals would rather see her dead than have her memoir published. Following her death at the age of 59, The Sun reported that Kitaen had said O.J. had all but confessed to the killings. Although these revelations stirred new public interest, they did not result in any legal consequences. Meanwhile, the families of Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman pursued justice through a civil lawsuit. In October 1996, just 4 months into the proceedings, a civil jury found Simpson liable for the wrongful deaths of both victims. The verdict came with a $35 million judgment in damages awarded to both families. However, collecting the judgment proved difficult. Simpson later filed for bankruptcy, significantly delaying and minimizing payments to the families. Fred Goldman, Ronald's father, accused Simpson of hiding assets and moving to Florida to benefit from bankruptcy protection laws. The Brown family also tried to stop the publication of Simpson's controversial book, If I Did It, which was later released with the rights awarded to the Goldman family as part of the debt settlement. Despite the book's earnings, Fred Goldman claimed that O.J. had paid only $13,000 in total over the years, just a fraction of the court-ordered amount. The lack of accountability infuriated the victims' families and disappointed many who had followed the case closely. The O.J. Simpson trial remains one of the most polarizing and memorable legal battles in American history. It not only exposed deep racial divisions, but also highlighted how fame, media, and wealth can influence justice. Decades later, the debate over Simpson's guilt or innocence continues, leaving behind a legacy of unresolved questions and public fascination. Custody of O.J.'s children. During the challenging period of O.J.'s trials, Brown's family took care of Justin and Sidney, and after O.J. was acquitted, their custody had to be shared. However, this did not happen without a fight from the Brown family as they struggled to give up the kids, especially when O.J. demanded full custody of his children. The fight resulted in a court case, but the judge in their ruling decided to send Justin and Sidney back to live with their father in Brentwood. The Browns winning custody of the children was going to be a Herculean task, because it has been established over the years that custody is usually won by the biological parents. However, Considering the peculiarities of O.J.'s case, it came as a shock that the judge would permit full custody of O.J. to his children. It was ruled in his favor because, despite the substantial fact and evidence that O.J. had abused his late wife, there was no evidence that he touched his children in this regard. Even after the court had ruled in favor of O.J., the Browns were relentless in their attempts to gain custody, and this fight lasted for 5 years. Finally, in the appeal, the court agreed on the fact that the grim circumstances surrounding this murder could not be thrown aside, so they granted guardianship to the Browns at the appeal court. But this was not the end of the matter, as the children begged the courts to allow them stay with their father. According to CBS News, the kids wrote a letter to the judges on the appeals court begging them for a chance to stay with their father. In the light, this made the Browns withdraw their case, and so they relocated with their father to Florida. Notwithstanding, because of the budding love for their grandchildren, the Browns family stayed in touch with O.J., even though they had to put on a mask as disclosed by Brown's sister, Tanya, who had to consistently treat O.J. with poise and dignity irrespective of the incident. O.J.'s second daughter, Sydney Simpson. Sydney was merely 8 years old when her mother Nicole was murdered, and her father was accused of the crime. Despite the murky details surrounding the incident, Sydney somewhat believes that her father was responsible for her mother's death. As you can imagine, this tragic event made Sydney's life a living hell, as she constantly had to live in her father's tainted shadow. She made efforts and went to great lengths to evade the media attention, but sadly, she wasn't always successful. In 2014, she changed her name to Portia in a bid to keep away her true identity and live a normal life. Although not a verbal response to questions over the years, changing her name was probably a symbolic act of forging her own independent identity and distancing herself from her father. In addition, the trauma of losing her mother at a young age and living in her father's shadow would have undoubtedly taken a major psychological toll on Sydney. Also, keeping a low public profile has probably allowed Sydney to protect herself emotionally. By avoiding the spotlight, she maintains control over telling her own story rather than having it defined by her father's actions. O.J.'s first daughter, Arnell. Apparently, not only was Sydney emotionally and mentally affected by the legal battles of her father, but so also was Arnell. However, it seems that Arnell viewed her father more in a positive light, unlike Cindy, as she was seen to have defended her father during his trials. Arnell was quite outspoken about her father's innocence, but reports were shown that these two quarrel over everything, especially her lifestyle. It was revealed that Arnell had no sense of money management, as she was careless with her father's mortgage payment in Florida. She was also a wild spender, as she splurged money on bags and outfits after her father gave her custody of his money. Her close relations revealed that during this time, she became an alcoholic, and this was the major reason behind her heated fights with her father, as he even sought to marry her off just for her to leave his house. Even with her reckless lifestyle of Arnell, she carried the weight of the first child as she cared for her younger siblings, Justin and Sydney, trying to provide them with a normal life after the trial. Arnell also appeared as a witness for her during his first trial of murder. Consequently, in his following robbery trial in 2008, Arnell testified as a witness for her father, as she also pleaded with the Parole Board of Commissioners to release her father from prison after he had spent 9 years. Arnell described her feelings for her father in these words, "like my best friend and my rock," during the parole hearing. She also emphasized the challenges that she and her family had faced in the wake of these legal issues and pleaded with the public to give them a second chance, knowing that O.J. was remorseful. Despite Arnell's effort to rebrand her life, her father's shadows seemed to overshadow her struggles for a better name. Her professional life has been hindered because of the trial, and currently, she makes a living from being a fashion show producer as a rapper. In her leisure time, she still works and manages her father's estate, as well as taking a solid stand for her brother. Speculations about Jason Simpson's involvement in Nicole's murder. Jason Simpson was the second child of Marguerite, who was born in 1970 and had witnessed the affair between Nicole Brown and his father. Growing up, the family claimed that Jason had faced many developmental and behavioral challenges as he started abusing alcohol and hard, harmful substances at the early age of 14. And the records disclosed that he made attempts to commit twice. Long before the tragic death of his stepmom and her friend, it was let slip that Jason had mental problems and, far worse, a criminal record. According to the records from the police, they found out that Jason had a long history of violent behavior which had led to his arrest 4 times before the murder. He was charged with driving under the influence of alcohol, using an expired license, and notoriously for assault. In the year of the murder, Jason had attacked 2 of his girlfriends in which he nearly murdered one of them. He also had a confrontation with his boss, in which he drew out his kitchen knife and charged at him. With these patterns, it was rational to cast the lot on OJ's son because, despite the fact that OJ had a record of physical abuse, he was not skilled with the drawing of a knife, unlike his son. Secondly, Jason has a disorder, an anger disorder to be specific, and because of this, he frequently had violent outbursts. He was often admitted at a mental health facility because of his blackouts and hallucinations. His doctor had stated that Jason was under the pills, and as such, he was able to curtail the triggers. However, in the months preceding the time of the murder, Jason had relapsed on his medication. Hence, it was also logical to consider that the death of Nicole Brown came as a result of the irrational behavior of her stepson, whom Nicole didn't tell she was going out to eat on the day of the murder. It was also found in Jason's belongings that he has a journal where he wrote down his violent thoughts and desire to harm anyone who came near his treasures. Further delving into the connection between the murder and Jason was the found physical evidence at the crime scene. It was discovered that the fibers on OJ did not match those of a black knit navy watch cap that was discovered at the scene. It was also noted that in his regular life, Jason was a solid fan of wearing a watch cap. And as coincidence will come into play, it shows that Jason was wearing the same cap in his photo from March 24, 1993, which was also found at the murder scene with his dog. However, the police failed to check the fingerprints of Jason as they solely focused on his father, whose prints were not found at the scene. The skin and blood samples also did not match the DNA of OJ. Furthermore, Ron Goldman was discovered to have damaged hands, which showed that he tried to wrestle with his assailant, but Jason was left unscathed because the Los Angeles police, at that time, did not consider him a major threat and suspect, so they never bothered to interview him. Another piece of evidence pointing to the fact that Jason may or may not have been the murderer was the blade they found in his closet. It was found out that Jason had a storage full of sharp items, including a knife that looked like a blade involved in the murder. Jason's knives came in different shapes and forms, as he had the Swiss and stiletto. When the forensic expert came to examine the knives, he pointed out that the wounds on the victim's head matched the rear of the knives, ruling out the other equipment as an exhibit. Also, as per classmates of Jason who attended the Army and Navy Academy and spoke with authorities, Jason had undergone special training on how to use a knife skillfully. OJ, on the other hand, might have been a notorious abuser, but he had no knowledge of how to wield a knife, and even the sight of blood disgusted him. Jason also was reported to have been around the scene between the short time of the murder. According to the Los Angeles Police Department, Jason had no one to rely on for an alibi after 9:50 p.m. and was on his own. Also, Jason's sibling's mother had probably never shown up to visit her at her workplace, which might have aggravated his tense relationship with her. Finally, OJ had hired a renowned criminal defense attorney to defend his son in the wake of the killings and prior to his own arrest. This move was suspicious because the police were not searching for Jason at that time, as they didn't realize he was even a threat. His father probably was shielding him from the possibility of a prosecution just in case he was found. Or could it be that OJ was trying to save himself by pointing fingers at his son, who might also have been liable? As the renowned principal states, the best line of defense for a client who is falsely accused of murder is to point fingers at someone else who could be accountable. Now, it's time to share your own thoughts on the age-old question. Did O.J. Simpson do it? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And thanks for watching. To enjoy more exciting videos, click play on the video up on your screen.